finally Wilkinson decided that he could make no headway, that
But he had more men.
oh, he had more men,
They
but this
were
is
outnumbered. The British were outnumbered.
typical
Yeah,
throughout the War of 1812,
yeah, yeah,
that the British were just better trained.
yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stories of 1812 podcast. This is a series where we look into the lives of characters and their stories that existed during the War of 1812 period and around that period in North America, on the American side, on the Canadian side, and we look at their lives and why it is important to remember them. And today we're going to have someone here who is going to help us do that with one particular individual. And we're very excited to welcome a historian from Niagara-on-the-Lake. His name is Ron Dale. And by introduction, Ron is also a genealogist, as I understand. So it's not only the history that he's looking at, he's always looking at family trees. In his earlier career, as he just mentioned to me off camera, he's retired, but he did have a day job, and he was the superintendent of National Historic Sites, sites including Fort George and Brock's Monument. He is the author of a number of books, including, I'm just going to mention a few here, The Invasion of Canada, The Battles of the War of 1812, The Fall of New France, How the French Lost a North American Empire, a book on Niagara-on-the-Lake, and most recently a book that he co-authored on Fort George. But you did that with a number of people. It wasn't just your
That's
show.
right.
Yeah, yeah, some very eminent. Uh, do do we want to talk a little bit, very briefly, about your interest in history because you've been deep in it even
Oh,
before
yes.
the War of
Yeah,
1812.
I've been
Yeah.
deep in it since I was about 12 years old.
Oh wow.
That in my family, on your birthday, you got to go on a little trip somewhere. I was living in the Ottawa area, and I wanted to see the newly opened Upper Canada Village. So we went there as a family on a Sunday drive. It's about an hour's drive from where we lived. And we went to the Chrysler's Farm
Oh
Battlefield
right.
Memorial
Yeah.
Building.
Yeah.
And I was mesmerized by that. Inside, there were these incredible Madame Tussaud wax
Mm,
figures,
mm.
full-size wax figures of the soldiers who participated in the battle. And my mother telling me, this is where we defeated the Americans. And from that point on, I was
Mm.
fascinated by the War of 1812.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've also written, I don't think we have time for it today, maybe another time, about who won the war. And I went through that article. I really like that because it's not an easy, it's not an easy answer.
Well,
Yeah,
it's still
uh,
argued.
yeah, that's right. Different people having different perspectives. Um, the New France, I'm just going to digress just for one quick second. The New France is your study of New France. That's interesting because the Plains of Abraham, which we know about in as Canadian history, but that seemed to be even more formative than the War of 1812 when it comes to Canada, because then we had le fait français. We ended up being a bilingual, bicultural country.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it had a major impact on Canada. But the War of 1812 as well was something that, because Canadians or let's say inhabitants of British North America at the time, because of course it wasn't Canada until 1867, uh, it's kind of brought them all together with a common enemy. And it was really the forming incident for Canadian nationalism, I suppose.
Hmm.
It made Confederation in 1867 much easier because their forefathers had stood together at Queenston Heights and
Hmm.
Lundy's Lane and so on and so forth.
Hmm. Hmm. You've also, not to give you too many kudos, but you've also done many articles, articles about historic sites. And the series that I was very intrigued by, because it ties in with our theme, was the series you did on the men who fought particularly in World War One, who are listed on the cenotaph, which is that tower monument right in the middle of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
That's right.
Yeah.
The cenotaph in Niagara-on-the-Lake, in the old town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, but also the cenotaph in Queenston,
Mhm.
which was erected by the township of Niagara before the amalgamation into the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Attending Remembrance Day ceremonies, particularly with the World War II casualties, their names were read off. They still are in each Remembrance Day ceremony. Their names are read off, but nothing about them.
Mm,
And with the World War II vets,
mm,
it's not even their Christian name; it's their initial.
mm.
So you'll get Dinwiddie G. That's it. So
Well, because there's not enough space on. Yeah,
I'm not sure why
yeah,
they did that, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought, well, every one of these were individuals with mothers and fathers and wives and children and families and uncles and aunts and so on and so forth. So maybe doing a series of short articles
Mm,
that would outline the circumstances of their death and tell a little bit about them.
mm,
Um, and I thought that was important, but it was right at the time when the Legion was raising money for the repair of the clock tower cenotaph in the old town.
yeah.
And so I thought this would maybe bring a little bit of awareness and get people to open their wallets up and donate to the
Mhm.
cause.
Do you feel that it deepened your understanding of the history of that period by looking at individual stories?
Well, I had been looking at individual stories for
Yeah,
quite some time with my genealogist's
yeah,
sort of focus.
yeah.
I looked at all my various, second cousins and third uncles and great uncles, my grandfather, my father, his brothers, uh, none of whom were killed during the World War I or World War II, but
Mhm,
all who had served. So I pulled their service records and tried to understand a little bit more about what they might have gone through in World
mhm.
War I or World War II.
Well, today we're looking at a personal story, and it's only one because you have other ones in your family tree that we may get around to some other time. But we're here to talk about James Prendergast,
Yes.
and he was Irish. Is it an Irish name or?
No, it's actually a
Yeah,
Norman name.
yeah.
Prendergast means take guest.
Uh,
Okay, and
Prendre in French. Yeah, yeah,
so Maurice de Prendergast was
yeah.
a Norman knight
Wow.
who was involved in the invasion of Ireland
Mm,
under Earl Strongbow, and the Prendergasts are what are called Norman Irish.
mm,
They're not Irish, but they're among the oldest of the implants into Ireland. Um, So at any rate, Prendergasts lived in County Cavan and County Monaghan, and particular James Prendergast, the subject of my study, was born in 1789 in.
but he was a Protestant, though. He was,
Oh, they were Protestants,
yeah, yeah.
yes,
And
yeah,
that's significant, I think, when you talk about Ireland.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes and no, because there
yeah.
were also relative Prendergasts who were Catholic.
Uh,
There's a number of families like that in Ireland that had a sort of Catholic branch and a Church of Ireland branch.
I thought you didn't intermarry, though, or maybe you
Oh,
did.
it was actually
Yeah.
quite common.
Uh, uh,
And what you find in the 18th century and the first half of the 19th century is you do find Catholics and Protestants marrying,
mm,
but the boys would be brought up in the religion of the father and the
mm,
girls in the religion of the mother.
yeah. Okay, James Prendergast. In 1803, he joined the 100th Regiment of Foot. Have I got that right? Or was it an Irish regiment? There was some,
Well, no,
yeah,
it was an English Army regiment. It
yeah.
was, but recruited primarily in Ireland. And so he actually joined in 1805. The regiment was formed in 1803.
Three.
He joined in 1805 as soon as he turned 16.
Wow.
So he was a boy soldier.
Wow.
He was well educated. His mother, Maria Corey, was related to the Coreys of Rock Quarry in County Monaghan, and
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
members of parliament and sheriffs of the county
Uh-huh.
and so on. So he was well connected, but his father was not a rich man.
Yeah.
Um, but he was James was well educated,
Yeah.
could read and write and so on and so forth, and wanted a career in the British Army. So
Wow.
at the age of 16, he enlisted in the 100th Regiment of Foot, which had just been formed in 1803.
They sailed from Dublin and they sailed to Quebec. And there he, at Quebec, what we know as Quebec City, he joined the garrison there. What
Yeah,
was his first?
the
Yeah.
100th Regiment went into the garrison at Quebec initially, but then they were um, sent out as garrisons for various posts over the years, including Fort George,
Mm.
so that there is a local connection. James Prendergast was a sergeant
Mm.
at the time that they were at Fort George. So he advanced through the ranks fairly rapidly, becoming a sergeant and then becoming a staff sergeant. He was appointed as barrack master, which is a staff appointment, extra money, and so on. And but he still dearly wanted to become an officer and pursue a
Yeah,
career.
we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Um, I have a note here, and the confusion is there's two James Prendergast. Was he a quartermaster, or what was his title? Adjutant?
He
There's
was
some
a
confusion.
barrack master.
Barrack master.
Yeah.
Okay, but he did. Now maybe I'm a little early. He did rise to the rank of adjutant, or was that
Oh,
yeah,
no, the adjutant's rank came a little later.
later? Okay,
Okay.
so we won't go too fast. Okay. So, uh, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but he didn't sit still. And I
No.
guess you didn't at the time in the British Army. And he, we would find him at a number of battles. And the three I think that we are sure about, you'll have to clarify, or I'm sure about, is Noix, Chrysler's Farm, and the Battle of LaCall Mills.
Hmm.
Before we go there, am I going too fast? Was he, the, how would I say it? Illinois was what, in 1813 or,
Yeah,
yeah,
um, so was Crosser's Farm in 1813.
13. Yeah.
His, yeah, I, you know, he he wanted to become an officer.
Mm.
I've mentioned that. In the spring of 1812, before the War of 1812 was declared, he made a petition to horse guards, the commanders of the British Army, to be
Right. Which
appointed.
is in London. We should just
Yeah,
tell our viewers at Horse Guards. Yeah.
he wanted to be
Yeah.
appointed as an officer without purchase. He couldn't
Mm-hmm.
afford the cost of
Cost of it. Yeah.
purchasing a commission. At that time, a lot of officers purchased their
Like
commissions,
Brock.
like Brock.
Yeah.
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 And that was turned down. So his next option was to distinguish himself in some way. And when the War of 1812 was declared on June 18th, 1812, it gave him an excellent opportunity.
So that's why he did all these heroic deeds, which we're going to get onto in a minute.
Well,
Yeah.
possibly that
Yeah.
had something to do with it. He took
Yeah.
a lot of risks,
Yeah.
let's say.
Well, let's talk about the first one at Ile-aux-Noix. He was stationed at Ile-aux-Noix in the Richelieu River, and two American gunboats had sailed up the river, and he took action.
That's right. The
Yeah,
Americans were reconnoitering the British position at Ile-aux-Noix because they were planning an invasion of Lower Canada.
right.
They'd assembled a fairly large army in 1813 and laid plans for attacking up the Richelieu River
Is
and
this
taking
near the
Montreal.
border? Just to clarify for our
Oh,
viewers,
very definitely. Yeah.
it's sort of on the
Yeah.
border, near the border.
So that
Okay,
the Richelieu River empties into Lake Champlain.
Champlain.
So,
Yeah.
or the other way around, Lake Champlain empties into the Richelieu. But at any rate,
Mm.
um, it was very close to the border with the United States. And so the Americans were reconnoitering. They sent two sloops of war, the Eagle and the Growler, up the Richelieu River, but the winds turned contrary. And on June 3rd, 1813, you find the ship starting to be blown towards the Canadian shore rather than the
Oh,
middle
that's
of the river.
convenient. Yeah.
And James Prendergast applied to his senior officer and was allowed to lead a group of soldiers to the side of the Richelieu River that the Americans were approaching,
Mm,
fired their muskets at the boats.
yeah.
The Americans sent a boat towards the Canadian shore. Prendergast captured that boat, and with it, they rowed out to one of the American sloops and forced the surrender of it. They boarded the sloop and forced the surrender of it.
Now,
Uh,
was this when he was promoted?
no, these
Not yet. Not yet.
he was
I'm in a
still
hurry.
a staff sergeant.
Okay.
He was still the
So no.
barracks master. He had no reason to be there. He
Right.
wasn't the sergeant of an infantry company. He was but he took the initiative, and
So
that's what he kept doing, was taking the
the
initiative.
initiative, no reward yet as a result of it.
Well, no,
Yeah.
he was recognized for that, for the his role in the capture of the Eagle and the Growler, and was offered the position of adjutant of the Canadian Voltigeurs.
Right. We should explain what that is. It's kind of like accountant of the regiment, or
The adjutant was a position in a regiment that kept the books.
mm,
Okay, they were responsible for instructing junior officers. They kept all the records of the men, the pay lists, and the pay books, and so on and so forth. So it was really an administrative position.
so it's not what he wanted, really.
No, and it's
Yeah.
not what the other officers wanted either,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
was a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it gave him some extra pay, and
Right.
eventually it led to his being promoted finally.
Okay.
But that was after the Battle of Chrysler's Farm. But
Well,
he
we're
stayed with the Canadian Voltigeurs,
right under Salaberry.
and
Yeah.
the Voltigeurs were a sort of semi-professional militia.
Mm,
They were recruited in Lower Canada, in Quebec, and were primarily a francophone regiment. Although there was a company, there were anglophones as well,
and he
Irishmen
mixed in with
like
that. Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
Well, as a sort of separate
Yeah.
entity, that
Yeah.
the regiment had 10 companies. 9 of them were French Canadian, and one of them was English Canadian, basically.
So Noix would have been 1812.
Yeah, well, the capture of the Eagle and
Yeah.
Growler were in 1813.
1813. And then we're still in 1813, but we're moving ahead to November at the Battle of Crysler's Farm that
That's
you visited as a young man. And there his actions were, I guess, particularly heroic because he led a group of soldiers to capture an American cannon.
That's right.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
that company, James's company of the Canadian Voltigeurs, were sent to Kingston to reinforce the British forces there, and ended up in the Battle of Crysler's Farm near Morrisburg, Ontario, on the St. Lawrence River.
right.
And in that battle, there were several thousand Americans, a few thousand Americans,
They were outnumbered, the Canadians.
opposed
Yeah,
by 800 British Canadians
yeah,
and Mohawk warriors.
right.
And during the height of the battle, the Americans were firing their cannon at the British line. The British were all drawn up in
Um,
a thin line.
yeah,
James Prendergast grabbed 13, perhaps willing, perhaps unwilling volunteers
voluntold.
from the 49th Regiment and rushed
Yeah,
the American artillery. Well, the Americans fired at them, of course, as they were rushing it. Only James and
and
one
one
other
other
man
man. Yeah,
reached the cannon,
yeah.
uh, presumably chased away the American artillerymen or put them to the bayonet. I'm not sure which. There's no information on that.
Mm.
But they actually turned the American guns on the Americans and fired 2 shots from it.
No doubt helping them successfully win the battle.
The Americans withdrew from the
Yeah,
battlefield
yeah.
eventually, and the Battle of Crysler's Farm was a great British victory.
Now that wasn't the only time. We've had two times. And then in 1814, there was a battle at Lacall Mills in which he was also involved.
Yeah, the coal
Yeah.
mill is right across the border from the United States. It's
Uh,
and on the main road up.
into Montreal?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
And the American plan for 1814 was to achieve some victories that would give them a better position at the negotiating table when finally a peace was
They,
negotiated.
they were on their side of the board, and then they led forays into.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this was an
Yeah.
invasion, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was actually the James Wilkinson, the American commander, was the one who had lost the Battle of Chrysler's Farm. So he was at Plattsburgh and was leading a fairly large army, and his whole plan was to attack towards Montreal and force the British to concentrate their troops. And in a final pitched battle, he was hoping to defeat the British and make Montreal vulnerable to capture. Well, at La Colle, there was a blockhouse, a wooden blockhouse, and a stone mill, and a very small garrison of British soldiers
Mhm.
manning those positions. The Americans went through atrocious conditions, roads that were quagmires of mud, deep snow, and so on, to reach La Colle, and started setting up their artillery. But their largest pieces of artillery, their 18-pounder that would reduce basically the stone mill and the blockhouse in minutes if they got them into position, they were bogged down. And the British tried to recapture or capture, or at least chase away the gunners from the American artillery before they could bring the big gun up.
Right.
That failed. But James Prendergast, who was stationed not far away with a squad of Canadian voltigeurs, um, with permission from his officers, rushed the voltigeurs towards the position, crossed
Of the
through,
cannon?
crossed
Yeah.
through a
Yeah.
stream up to their, elbows basically in water, and attacked the American artillerymen, eventually driving them away.
Well,
Um,
were the Americans in the process of firing? I mean, were they
well,
subject
they
to
were they were
can?
firing. Yes, they were
Yeah.
firing their 12-pounder
Oh,
cannons
wow.
while trying to move the 18-pounder cannon up. They also had a mortar that fired exploding shells. But as Prendergast and his volunteers were
Yeah.
attacking the American position, the British had actually brought some gunboats up into the Lacole River about, maybe a kilometer away and started lobbing shells at the Americans as well.
So that helped in a
That
sense.
helped. It was a combined effort. And finally, Wilkinson decided that he could make no headway, that
But he had more men.
he had more men,
They
but this
were
is
outnumbered. The British were outnumbered.
typical
Yeah.
throughout the War of 1812
Yeah. Yeah.
that the British were just better trained.
Yeah.
So casualties were not that heavy in any of these actions. There weren't that many men killed
Which
or
is
wounded in
very
these.
surprising to us, I
It
think.
is surprising
Yeah.
to us,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
at any rate, the Wilkinson finally, by evening, decided
Yeah.
that his whole campaign was in vain, and he retreated with the American army, and that was the
Mhm.
last real invasion of
Yeah.
American
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah. So he went back to England or went back to Ireland after the war.
The
Yeah.
war ended in with the ratification of the Treaty of Ghent in February 1815,
Dean.
and uh, the garrisons in British North America remained for a while because Napoleon, who had been defeated in the spring of 1814 and sent into exile, returned, gathered an army,
Indeed.
and
Yes.
finally would meet his end at the Battle of Waterloo on June 18th, 1815.
So the British still needed their men there.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
The British to ensure that the war was over, with the Treaty of Ghent signed, to end the War of 1812 and the final defeat of Napoleon, then they started withdrawing troops from Canada, and they started reducing the size of the Army and the Navy.
Mhm.
That a lot of soldiers were laid off. James Prendergast
He
in the
went on
100th
half
Regiment
pay.
of Foot,
Yeah,
yeah, was went back to England, where
right.
the regiment was disbanded, and he chose to go on half pay. Now, what that meant was that he still remained on the list of the Royal Army, but and he was an officer by that time. He had finally got promoted to an ensign first in the
Which is the entry rank
Voltigeurs,
for
and
officers.
then finally
Yeah,
it was confirmed as an ensigncy in the 100th Regiment of Foot.
right.
But the 100th Regiment of Foot was being disbanded. So he went on half pay, which was he was still on the list
Mm.
and could be called to active duty if there was a requirement or a vacancy that he could fill as an ensign in one of the active regiments. And he petitioned the government to
So,
place him in an active regiment. He wanted to get ahead.
and
Did,
then, but
didn't have.
finally, finally he ended up emigrating to Canada, right? With
That's right. Yeah,
he got a
that
land grant in
his
Pontiac
petitions
County.
went
Yeah,
unanswered. He wasn't
yeah.
promoted. He wasn't placed in an active regiment, and finally he was given a commission, I suppose, as the land agent for the settlement of Pontiac County in
We should
Quebec.
just clarify for our viewers that Pontiac is upriver from Ottawa, off the Ottawa River in that area.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And he ended up there. He built, I think he cleared 30 acres, it says in my notes. He built a sawmill. He raised a family at a grist mill. He had three children. I'm just trying to summarize quickly, but he settled there in a sense,
That's
right?
right, and he
Yeah,
brought the rest of the family
yeah,
of Prendergasts
yeah.
who
Oh,
had been
wow,
in
okay.
County Monaghan to settle in Pontiac County. So
Right, right.
they became a well-established family there. Now, James would frequently travel to Quebec City
Hmm.
to welcome new immigrants coming in and conduct them to Pontiac County. And it was there that he contracted cholera. It was a
Yeah,
huge cholera epidemic in Quebec at the time. And on August 11th, 1834, he died of cholera
yeah.
and was
And he was,
buried the day that he died.
and he was only 45.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And his gravesite is unknown.
Oh,
There were so many deaths to cholera that
yeah,
they were doing mass burials and not necessarily marking or retaining records of exactly where those burials were. So
right.
we have no idea where he was buried.
Now, one of the reasons that we're telling this story um, is uh, a search for recognition, if I could call it that, right?
Yes.
And there was we were talking earlier, and you told me a little bit about how awards and recognitions were done and not done in the British Army at the time. So at the Battle of Waterloo, medals were awarded for all participants, as I understand it. But other soldiers in the Napoleonic Wars didn't receive anything, and the soldiers in the War of 1812 did not receive anything until a fellow by the name of the Duke of Richmond came along, and he
Hmm.
sought uh, to correct that.
Well, and the
Yeah,
prime minister at the time, this is the 1840s,
yeah.
was the Duke of Wellington.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So following the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the Duke of Wellington ensured that all the participants received a Waterloo medal.
Mm,
Prior to that, medals, normally gold medals, were only issued to the commanders of actions.
mm.
So that, for example, de Salaberry, who had been
Yes.
the victor of the Battle of Chateauguay during the War of 1812, received a gold medal.
Mhm.
But none of the soldiers who participated got any sort of recognition like that. So the Duke of Richmond petitioned Wellington and the government. The cry was taken up, and all of these thousands of men who had fought Napoleon, the French and Napoleon since 1793, including the War of 1812 from 1812 to 1815, um, were eventually awarded the Military General Service Medal. Now, the Military General Service Medal came with a bar
Mm.
outlining one of the actions you'd been in, um, which could have been uh, Battle Hawes or one of these events, one of these battles in the Iberian Peninsula during the Napoleonic Wars. But also three actions of the War of 1812 were selected: the capture of Detroit in 1812, the Battle of Crysler's Farm, and the Battle of Chateauguay, both in 1813. Uh,
But our friend still lucked out or
well,
lucked in.
he
I don't
yes,
know what the expression
he would
is.
have
Right.
qualified if he
Yeah.
was still alive in
Live. Right.
1847, 48,
Right.
but the medal was not awarded posthumously.
Right.
So there was no commemorative thing to mark Prendergast's service. And
Now,
surprisingly, there
yeah.
isn't even a Prendergast street
Wow.
in Pontiac County.
Wow.
I had expected it, but it doesn't exist. There
Now,
is in Shawville, by the way, a John Dale
which is
Road.
further up, I think, than Pontiac. Yeah.
Well, Shawville is in Pontiac County.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Um, now, there is a personal reason why we're talking about that. And I think it has to do with family history. So when I went on the internet to prepare for this interview, I thought I'd found what existed. And then in our pre talk, uh, you were able to tell me all kinds of other facts. And that is because, as I understand it, he's part of your family history.
that's right.
Yeah.
My grandmother was Mary Prendergast,
Wow.
who's descended from Thomas Prendergast,
Mm.
James Prendergast's
Yes.
brother.
Brother, right. Yeah.
So that led me to research family members, including James Prendergast. The Dales seem to have kept a very low profile in Pontiac County, and the Prendergasts represent the more flamboyant part of the family tree.
Mm. And this there is a point here, isn't there, about the general British Army, because at the time you had to pay for an officer's commission, and here was an individual, brave, courageous, very capable, but could not work his way into the higher ranks because his family was not able to afford it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, there were quite a number of commissions that were granted and promotions that were granted without pay. That if there was a vacancy in a regiment for, let's say, a lieutenant or a captain, and no one was interested in purchasing that commission, then the colonel could have that commission granted without pay.
Mm.
And, which was very important to these very capable men who had worked their way up through the ranks, had become sergeants,
Mhm.
sergeant majors, etc., but couldn't afford the price of a commission. You would have to save every penny you earned as a private or a corporal or a sergeant for about 25 years to
Wow.
be able to afford.
But in hindsight, and we had a chat about this as well. Theoretically, he could have sold his commission,
Yes,
but he didn't want to because he wanted to remain in the army
that's
and be an
correct.
officer. So he's a dedicated guy,
He
right?
wanted to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
an officer in the British Army, an
yeah.
active officer in the British Army.
Mm.
And yes, he could have sold out or cashed in his commission.
Yeah, which was
Um,
common, and then you could move
yes,
up in the ranks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the you could also be kicked if you were an officer. You could be kicked out of the army,
Mhm.
but you got the price of your commission back if you
When
were
when
kicked
you
out of the
left.
army.
Yeah.
And it was called being cashiered.
Mm.
So we still use that term from time to time.
And that is a system that did not end until the late 1800s.
1871.
Yeah, yeah.
That finally the government bought out everyone's commissions, and from then on it was certainly just promotion through ability.
Well, thank you for telling, his story because, I mean, we know about the Brocks, But Brock's family was wealthy. He could afford his commission. He had brothers in the army as well, and they bought commissions. And this is a story about a rather personal story about someone who we could say, for all purposes, deserved to have a commission, but was one unable to do so.
Well, and there were many like him
Yeah.
who worked their way up through the ranks and eventually became officers.
Mm.
And it was a tough row for them to hoe as well, because a lot of the other officers in the regiment were from the upper classes.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden you have some bumped up sergeant in the officers' mess, and you wonder how they were treated by the toffee-nosed officers,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the regiment when there was someone that wasn't from the same class that
But
was.
still, the British Army worked. It wasn't a meritocracy, but the men who were leading officers were by and large, could we say that they were competent at
Oh,
that
I
time?
think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah,
It's I mean the British Army was probably one of the most successful armies, man for man,
yeah,
at the time. And a lot of it had to do with their training of their soldiers, but also a lot of it had to do with the men who led them.
yeah,
And they led from the front.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry to say that we've run out of time. And boy, I can tell, you could probably tell our viewers, our listeners, that we could talk more.
Well,
So,
we could.
Ron, we'll have to look at getting you back. There are lots of topics to talk about, like who won the war. But in the meantime, I want to thank our listeners, our viewers, for joining us today. We are the Stories of 1812 podcast. Our website is storiesof1812.com. We thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank Jim Valen of Valen Entertainment. He does the technical wizardry. We'd be nowhere without him. And we hope that you can join us next time. Thank you for joining us.